Hey guys, it's Miss Sinclair for AP World History. Sorry, it's a different computer than the one I normally use, so things might be a little wonky. Today, we are going to be learning about topic 1.5, Civilizations in Africa. If you're one of my students, you should be completing a daily cover page in conjunction with this lecture and take notes as necessary. All right, so for your bell work, I would like you to identify 3 things you know about the geography of Africa. This should be super easy. Africa is an enormous continent with many different ecosystems, climate zones, major geographic features. It should be easy peasy to come up with 3 things about the geography of Africa. So today we are learning about civilizations in Africa. It is a huge topic and one that's difficult to cover in a sort of high school history class because there is so much diversity. You're not necessarily seeing one ginormous empire taking over a huge territory like with Rome or Persia or even the Abbasid Caliphate. So I might be making some generalizations, but I'm going to try and hit on the specifics when I can. So our objective for today, we're covering topic 1.5, and your objective is you will be able to explain how and why states in Africa developed and changed over time. Okay. Are you ready? So we're going back to like ancient history. The earliest evidence we have about the Sahara was that it was actually a savanna. You have cave drawings, you have engravings on rock showing hippos, giraffes, elephants, all that far north, which means that there must have been water that far north to support those large megafauna. So somewhere in history, we see that the climate of Northern Africa changes and this enormous desert is created. The Sahara Desert acts as a very effective barrier separating North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. So the question is, how do you get across it? Well, it's a difficult environment to live in and to cross. You have large sand dunes, huge sandy plains, plain exposed rock. So it's difficult on the feet. There's not a lot of water. There's a lot of sun, little protection from the elements, huge sandstorms. So we know that people lived in the Sahara Desert when it was wetter. And we know that cattle was domesticated in North Africa before the Sahara dried out. So we see evidence of horse herding as well, but we don't really know a lot of evidence. We don't have a lot of information about that specifically. Some historians will argue that the Romans start our trans-Saharan trade. So trans-Saharan means across the Sahara. We don't actually have a lot of evidence to support that. It's more likely camel riding nomadic groups will be the first ones to really begin our trans-Saharan trade routes. So the trans-Saharan caravan routes are going to be a trading network that links North Africa to Sub-Saharan Africa that starts in about 300 BCE, but very slowly. Camels are actually going to come from Saudi Arabia. Camels are great for crossing the Sahara. Their wide feet are really effective on the sandy, uneven ground. They can go for a long time without water. They can carry a lot of weight. They are pretty heat resistant, kind of grumpy. When I was in Jordan, I rode a camel through the Wadi Rum. It's a large desert. And it was a little uncomfortable. So camels were a big innovation for this sort of trans-Saharan trade. We also are going to see that the Sahel the region south of the Sahara is going to be crucial as well. We see that lots of groups will gather here. It's sort of known as like a coastland, right? Because in many ways, the Sahara Desert is very similar to a large ocean, right? You don't have access to water, you're pretty exposed, it's difficult to cross. So northern traders will supply salt to people in sub-Saharan Africa, and sub-Saharan African traders would provide cola nuts, edible palm oil to the people in the Sahel, and then the Sahel act as the middlemen, right? So they are the people who are actually doing the business back and forth between. Any agriculture grown in North Africa would go north across the Mediterranean to Rome. So wheat, grapes, olives, any of this classic Mediterranean agriculture, it's not going south to the sub-Saharan region. It's going north across the Mediterranean. So let's talk a little bit about sub-Saharan Africa specifically. Oh, wait, I got a map. Gosh, you know I love my maps. So here are some of our major North African trade routes. So Timbuktu is definitely going to be a city to know for our North African cities. You see which regions would be using camels, which ones would be using donkeys, and which ones would be using porters. A porter is just a person. So you just, have someone carry all your stuff. Here is another map to note. So Africa is just such an enormous continent with a variety of geographic zones as well as climactic regions. So please take a moment to look at this. Let's see, you have a tropical equatorial region. So this is like tropical rainforest. Think like raining every day. You have more rainforest. So here's Lake Victoria. So Uganda's right here. I visited Uganda last Christmas. And one of the things, if you go into the mountains, you can really be in the jungle, but they have two seasons. They have a wet season and a dry season. And even in the dry season, you get a good bit of rain. And yet you still see these enormously dry regions that are completely desert, right? The Namib Desert, Somalia is so dry, the Sahara, of course. You have Mediterranean regions here in the north and actually South Africa. You'll find Mediterranean agriculture there as well. You have highlands right here. It's hard to see on this map, but sort of in Ethiopia and Kenya, this is the Rift Valley. So you have these enormous highlands which block the flow of rain from reaching sort of Kenya, Somalia, Tanzania. And yet here, once again, you got your tropical, right? So it's an enormous amount of territory. And with each different type of territory, you're going to find people who speak different languages, who eat different foods, whose ways of life are drastically different. So you really cannot make overarching statements about Africa unless you are talking about how diverse it is. So let's talk about sub-Saharan Africa a little bit. Sub-Saharan Africa has a really challenging geography to describe. So you have savanna, you have steppes, like high steppes, you have desert, you have tropical rainforest. So what we see is great traditions versus small traditions. So great traditions are a historian's term for the literate and well-institutionalized complex of religious and social beliefs and practices adhered to by diverse societies over a broad geographic area. All right, so what do I mean by that? I know that was really wordy. So think Rome, right? So Rome covers a large area, but there are sort of this institution of religious, social and cultural beliefs that everyone who's living in Rome are going to adhere to. They're going to be speaking Latin. They are going to be polytheistic. They are going to be participating in the Roman economy. So that means they're going to have shared values around money and food and value, right? So this would be a great tradition, is sort of this vast territory of Rome and this large cultural complex that it would encompass. Small traditions, on the other hand, are the term historians use for localized, usually non-literate set of customs and beliefs adhered to by a single society, often in conjunction with a great tradition, right? So the island of Sicily, which is part of Rome, has some own unique features that will set it apart from different parts of the huge Roman Empire, right? So small traditions, think like local traditions, versus great traditions, sort of like more like pop culture of the time, to put it in some geography terms that you learned last year. So by 1 CE, so by the time we have moved into the Common Era, Sub-Saharan Africa is a distinct cultural region, but does not have a single great tradition, right? So you have unity from similarities in small traditions. So isolation from sort of the rest of the world, but also other tribes, leads to this sort of, sorry guys, I apologize. I know this lecture is a mess. By this Common Era, Sub-Saharan Africa is a distinct cultural region, but does not have a great tradition. So you have unity in the similarities of small traditions due to isolation from the rest of the world and repeated migrations and interactions. So we have over 2,000 distinct languages corresponding to social and belief systems with distinctive rituals and cosmologies, right? So how these different societies viewed the world, viewed God. You see different food production systems. You see, in general, a lower population density in sub-Saharan Africa. And we see that sub-Saharan Africa is really not going to be invaded until the 19th century with European imperialism. This is in part because two things. One, the machine gun. Two, trains. Malaria and just the natural environment is going to prevent this sort of large-scale invasion from ever happening in sub-Saharan Africa. So what are some of these cultural characteristics that they do have in common? Well, we know that in general, in terms of agriculture, having sort of a hoe and a digging stick was common for agriculture. You have many different types of music, lots of instruments, especially drums. So there's this emphasis on rhythmic music. Music, dancing, and masks are all important in social rituals. So you have to understand these are broad commonalities that we see in these variety of small traditions throughout sub-Saharan Africa. We see commonalities in sort of how they govern themselves. So especially in regards to a king, you have the ritual isolation of the king. You have fixed social categories, age grouping, so elderly, young, children, kinship divisions, right? So based on family, distinct gender roles and relations, and occupational groupings, warriors, hunters, musicians, farmers. But these are not necessarily a hierarchy, right? These are distinct roles and groupings, but one is not necessarily inherently greater than any other. Historians think that these commonalities result from essentially these massive Bantu migrations. So we see this migration of people who lived in the southern Sahara region and migrated because of the Ice Age and all of the flooding and melting ice. So The Bantu peoples are sort of the collective name of a large group of sub-Saharan African languages and of the peoples speaking these languages. So we see early evidence of copper and iron smelting, right? Africans are figuring this out on their own, just like the Greeks are and the other people in the Iron Age. We see the use of fishing, canoes, nets, lines, hook. We know that the Bantu peoples lived in permanent villages on the edge of the rainforests, where they would grow yams, grains, domesticated goats, dogs, and other animals. So these Bantu peoples begin to migrate south. We know this because of the spread of technology. So we have archaeological evidence of these tools that the Bantu peoples brought with them to these new regions. And thus, between 500 BCE to about 1000 CE, you have this massive transfer of Bantu traditions and practices, both south, east, and west. So let's talk about a couple empires and kingdoms. The first one you should know is the Great Zimbabwe. So the Great Zimbabwe is a city whose many stone structures were built between 1250 to 1450, when it was a trading center and the capital of a large state. So it is now in ruins and within the modern country of Zimbabwe. The Empire of Zimbabwe was directly involved with Indian Ocean trade, unlike some of our other African kingdoms like Ghana, Mali, and the Songhai. So we know this based on the archaeological evidence that they have and records. So that means they are coming in contact with Hindus, with Muslims, with Christians, with Buddhists. They are doing business with people who live on different continents. So very cosmopolitan. We know that their long distance trade was based on gold, copper, and salt. We know that they would do long distance trade with the Kingdom of Mali, which is in northwestern Africa. And so they have this sort of decentralized commercial interest that will arise throughout the network. So this will include other Swahili, so this region here at the Swahili coast, other Swahili city-states that will export African gold from the Great Zimbabwe, right? So they're primarily an economic empire. So there's this great TED Ed I would really like you to watch on the Great Zimbabwe. This is a required one. It's not very long, but it's just going to give you a little bit more evidence and insight into this empire in sub-Saharan Africa. So, I said some of these things, but let's look at the map. So here is Zimbabwe, located like right over here. You see that they are going to be doing business. What this map really demonstrates is some of our European traders, as well as I want you to focus more on these red lines, right? These trade routes that were already in existence. In the 15th century, the Europeans are going to show up and be like, we're here, you're welcome. And the Africa, Asia are going to be like, where have you been, man? Like, we've been doing business for literally 1,000 years. So these trade routes are not new. So pay attention, look at the red lines here about how they connect Eastern Asia, China, and Japan. You go through the Strait of Malacca, along the Bay of Bengal, the Arabian Sea, up the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf. This is how Europe gets access to Asian goods, and of course down the Swahili coast. All right, the next kingdom I want you to know about is Ethiopia. Ethiopia is located in eastern sub-Saharan Africa. So let me show you real fast on the map. So Ethiopia is like right here. So Ethiopia is going to be unique in a number of ways, if I can go back to my slide. For one thing is they're Christian, right? So North Africa is Muslim. Sub-Saharan Africa is going to be primarily animist, right? So no one dominant religion, a variety of local indigenous faith traditions. But Ethiopia is going to be Christian. In fact, there's a story in the Bible of one of the apostles, one of the earliest followers of Jesus, sharing the gospel with an Ethiopian who's going to go back home and, start spreading Christianity everywhere. So they have a very ancient Christian tradition. Since basically Paul was wandering around the Mediterranean, you've had Christians in Ethiopia. So that's a really important thing for you to know. But the reason why Ethiopian Christianity looks different from European Christianity is going to be primarily because of the Muslim conquests. So with the spread of the Umayyad and the Abbasid caliphates, Ethiopian Christianity is going to be cut off from the Byzantines and European Christianity. There still are going to be Christian communities within the Middle East, but again, they're not able to sort of connect the dots because they're located in this vast Muslim empire. So Ethiopian Christianity is going to sort of develop its own tradition, just like you have Orthodox Christianity and the Roman Catholic Christianity, right? You have Ethiopian sort of Coptic Christianity. So we see that some Christian beliefs in Ethiopia will be blended with local animist beliefs about evil spirits and the needs to wear amulets to protect against spells. All right, now let's talk a little bit about the Hausa kingdoms. These are small feudal states. So you have a constant rivalry here. So first of all, they're located in West Africa, still south of the Sahara, but West Africa as opposed to East Africa. See, there's Ethiopia. They are going to be formed by the Hausa peoples between the 8th and 10th centuries. So think 700s to 900s. So they are located in modern-day Nigeria and all the way out to Sudan. They're going to include the city-state of Kano, Niram, Katsina, and Zaria. So Kano is going to really be an important base of trans-Saharan trade, specifically in salt, leather, and grain. You have no central authority between these city-states. So just like in Mesopotamia, just like in Greece, you have all of these city-states that have a lot of things in common with each other, but are also in constant competition, right? There's no one person who's in charge of all of them. So even though they have a shared language and culture, they are not necessarily friends. Eventually, they will be conquered by Fulani of the Sokoto Caliphate in the 19th century. So they're going to be around for a really long time. All right, let's do a few practice questions to finish up our day. Number 1, the economic and political power of the Great Zimbabwe was based on long-distance trade in All right, now is it, just one question. So make sure you've watched that TED Ed video. Just only one video. It's a short lecture today, so I really want you to watch that TED Ed video on the Great Zimbabwe. But for your summary, please explain how and why states in Africa developed and changed over time. Thank you, and have a great day.